So the whole class is about opening up yourself to the potential of what you could do. And in order to tap into your potential, you have to be realistic about where you are. Let's start standing so that you can see what standing feels like. So this 3 series is about the arms, wrists, shoulders, and yet, of course, it's always in the context of our whole self. So you could open inquiry about, well, what influence does the way that I use my arms have on the way that I stand or walk? The way that you look from left to right. Go ahead, look a bit left to right, see what that feels like right now. And you could see if the way that your arms and shoulders are influence the way that you breathe. So if you're just standing and breathing, what do you notice about your hands, your wrists, elbows, shoulders? And then have a walk around and see what is the experience you have of your arms in walking, your hands, your sense of connection. Where do your arms connect to your body? Do they connect to your body? And then you might slow down your pace a bit and go a little bit more, a little deeper, a little more abstract, and consider, could there be a relationship between how you use your arms and how you use your back and your pelvis? Okay, and then let that go and come lay down on your back with your legs straight and your arms by your sides. What does it take for you to land? Notice the way that you see yourself. The parts of yourself that you focus your attention on. And feel how the back of you is resting on the floor. Notice if there's differences on the right and the left side of you. Notice the length of each of your legs from heel to buttock. See if one of your legs somehow seems longer, feels longer. See if one of your legs is farther away from the floor. If one of your knees is looking more to the side or more toward the ceiling than the other one. And compare that with your feet. If one of your feet looks more to the side than the other one. And then that expression of your legs and your feet is related to the way that the back of your pelvis is touching the floor. And so notice if your pelvis feels heavier on the tailbone side, the bottom part of your pelvis, or maybe the upper part of your pelvis around your sacrum or your low back feels heavier and your tailbone's a bit lifted. And notice the curve of your low back, if it feels like there's a big space there, small space. And can you tell how long the space is between your pelvis and the next part of your back? And then from where your back makes contact with the floor again, imagine that this was somehow the bottom of your shoulder. And then as you move your attention up from the middle low back area, if you move your attention up in the direction of your neck, see overall if that whole portion of your upper back, including your shoulder blade, feels different on one side or the other. And could you zero in on your shoulder blades? Do you feel or sense or maybe just imagine the shape of your shoulder blade on your back, on the right and the left? And can you sense where your upper back is touching the floor, and then where it loses contact with the floor and becomes your neck, and then your head makes contact with the floor? What's that space like? And what's the difference in the feeling of turning your head to the left or turning your head to the right? Does that turning of your head have any influence on your shoulders or your arms or even a feeling in your hands? How far down your back do you get a sense of connection to the movement of turning your head? Okay, and then leave your head in the middle and bring your attention to your breathing. And take your air in through your nose if you're comfortable to do that. And follow your air to the back of your nose, to the top of your throat, the back of your throat, and down to where your lungs begin, just behind your collarbones in the front. And listen for the sense of passage of your breath from nose to the top of your chest. Notice if there's any obstruction there, if you might be tightening in your throat or tightening in your tongue, pressing your tongue into some part of your mouth, and just experiment a bit with what changes you could create there. If there's a way that you can get a sense of more spaciousness in the back of your nostrils, the back of your throat, going down to the top of your chest. And then notice what happens from the top of your chest moving down your chest. Does your breath feel like it moves downward towards your legs? Does it feel like it moves forward toward the ceiling? Maybe you feel like your breath goes into your chest and moves out toward your arms. Or maybe your breath just feels kind of like it lives right up there by your collarbones. And consider for a moment the three-dimensionality of your rib cage. And take your right hand and put your right hand on your left clavicle, your left collarbone. And just feel the length of your collarbone from the bottom of your throat. Walk your fingers or slide your fingers really gently across your collarbone, right out to the outer edge of your shoulder. I always think of this like walking the plank. Walk your fingers out to the outer edge of your shoulder. And then when you get to the outer edge of your shoulder, start to feel for where your shoulder blade begins. And, it depends how far underneath your own shoulder you can reach. It doesn't matter how far you reach. You just see if you can start to get the first impression of that top border of your shoulder blade. From the outer edge, there's a spine, a shoulder blade spine, let's say, that goes along the top edge of your shoulder and the back. And then you can, again, walk your fingers from your shoulder blade back across your collarbone to your chest. And then one more time from your chest across to your shoulder blade. And consider as you're doing that those pieces are connected. So a movement that involves your shoulder blade is a movement that involves your collarbone. Yeah? Okay, now rest that arm for a second and see if you see that left side of you differently than you see the right, just from having touched it like that. And then gently do the same thing to the other side. Use your left hand to walk your fingertips a few times across the length of your collarbone, outer border of your shoulder. Try to follow the bony landmarks to the top of your shoulder blade. And then take your two hands and put them at the start of both of your collarbones. There's a little divot there, little indentation at the bottom of your throat, and your collarbones start there. And this is also where your chest bone starts. So now walk your fingertips down your chest bone. And you might move your fingers around in sort of a little circular motion or just like a little walking motion. And go from the base of your throat down, walking the plank, down to the bottom of your rib cage. Straight down. And you'll know when you're off of your ribs because it'll get soft and it probably doesn't feel very good to press there. So try to find the bottom of your rib cage and then walk back up to the top of your rib cage. And consider that this part of your rib cage in the front is related to that part of your spine in the back. So abstractly, as you're palpating along your sternum, you could say that you're palpating along your thoracic spine in the back. Yeah? Okay. And then rest your arms and just take in the image of yourself you have after that sensory experience. And return to your breathing, your nostrils, the back of your throat, going down to your collarbones. And then continue bringing your air down to fill up your chest. And again, see what sort of feeling you get around your shoulder blades, around your rib cage. And then you take a little note of that and turn over onto your front side. And put your left cheek down on the floor. So your face is facing the right. And bend your right knee up along the floor out to the right. So your knee is on the floor, up parallel to your hip. Your right foot is on the floor. Not parallel to your hip, perpendicular to your hip, sorry. And you can see where it's the most comfortable. Of course, if you need to put a cushion underneath your thigh, of course, do so. Otherwise, investigate if it's more comfortable. Your knee might be more comfortable higher up toward your armpit, maybe lower down. See where you can have it resting. Yeah. And now that your chest bone is making contact with the floor, your brain changes the way that you breathe. So feel how your breathing moves into your back. Now adjust your arms so that your two hands are on the floor above your head, kind of like a diamond shape. The tips of your fingers are almost touching, and your arms can be as straight as is comfortable, but you keep your hands almost touching. And then continue paying attention to the way that your back feels as you're breathing. And see if you can listen for a sense of buoyancy, a lifting. So with your inhale, it's as though the contact you were making with the floor gets a little bit lighter. Can you still see your chest bone in your sensing? And could you sense the part of your spine that is behind your chest bone? And thinking about that part of your spine, start to do a movement of lifting your right elbow, the elbow that you're looking at. Lift your right elbow a little bit away from the floor and then bring it back down. And as always, take your time to figure out where you can reduce the effort. And the more you know what you're doing, the more you can adapt what you're doing. So the slower you go, the more you can feel, and the more you can feel, the more you have the potential to make changes. What kind of movement do you do with your right shoulder blade when you lift your right elbow? Could the movement accompany your breathing? So when you get that floating expansion from your inhale, can you let your right shoulder blade and the right side of your back respond to that breath movement? Okay, and then pause for a moment. And then come back to the movement of lifting your elbow, but see what it feels like to do a movement that's light and quick. So you don't rush. And maybe you just do it once, twice, and stop, once, twice, and stop. But you see what is required. What part of you do you use to make a light, quick movement of your elbow? What happens to your breathing when you're fluttering your elbow? Okay, now pause with that for a second. Imagine you were going to say, I don't know, with your right shoulder, and shrug your right shoulder up and then bring it back down. And play with that movement a bit and see, could you do it slowly? And could you do it quickly? And then I don't know what the opposite of I don't know is. I do know. You say pronouncedly, I do know, and you bring your shoulder blade down. I do know. So can you bring your shoulder blade down in the direction of your hip? Slowly. And then try that one quickly. And then again, go back to lifting your elbow slowly. And pay attention to how your back is involved in the movement. Can you tell the difference between where your shoulder joint is, where your arm is plugging into the joint, into the socket, versus the movement of your shoulder blade on your back and the response of your back? Okay, now leave your right elbow quiet and find out what happens when you lift your left elbow. And bring it back down slowly. Could you do that movement light and quick? A little fluttering of that elbow? It might be useful to lift your elbow, keep it lifted, and then don't bring it all, yeah, exactly. Don't bring it all the way down. Lift it and then see if you can lift it a little higher, a little lower, but never bring it back down. Yeah. And just keep track of your own ambition, right? As soon as you get fixated on mastering it, your brain is going to recruit all the usual suspects. So this is the game that we play, is how do we spontaneously try something new by being very unattached to any particular outcome. Now, what happens if you lift both elbows at the same time? Now, some of you might not feel like that's quite possible. So you might just imagine the feeling of your shoulder blades sliding toward your spine or down your back, and see what the movement is like in your imagination. And I actually, even if you're trying the movement, do it a few times in your imagination, and you might find that there's a part of you that you are neglecting that could be supporting the movement. Leave it and take a rest on your back. Sense your contact with the floor. Sense the movement of your breathing. And as you turn your head a bit left and right, think about the length of your collarbones. And then come on your front side. Bring up your right knee again, out to the right on the floor. Except this time put your right cheek down on the floor and have your hands above your head on the floor with your fingertips pointing at each other. And gently lift your left elbow away from the floor and bring it back down. This lesson my teacher calls the wings of an angel. I don't know if he made that up or if that's a Moshe thing, but it's a nice image for the quality of the movement. If your lifting elbow was the wing of an angel. And then pause. Now, similar to last week, this is a really interesting situation when your face is looking to the left, but your leg is bent out to the right. Can you figure out what you're doing with your spine in this position? What makes it interesting? And part of what's interesting about it is there's function and then there's habit. So we could argue that when your whole spine is facing the same direction, it frees you up for mobilizing your shoulders in a particular way. Whereas when your spine is twisted like it is now, it changes how it is to move your shoulders. But for a lot of us, we already have a twist in our spine. So see what happens if you lift and lower your right elbow, the one that's behind your head. And you can think about the curve of your spine. What part of your spine is looking to the left? What part of your spine is looking to the right? And it's an interesting kind of tongue twister, brain twister question. When you're lifting your right elbow, what are you asking of your spine? Are you asking it to go to the left or to the right? And could you lift both elbows at the same time? Do less than you can do, right? Keep erring on the side of being in this super gentle, boring zone. And when you're not striving for something, you're more likely to encounter spontaneous change. You do your best thinking when you're in the shower, or when you're meditating, or when you're doing some, mowing the lawn. When you're not trying to think of something is, of course, when all those spontaneous thoughts come. Yeah. Okay. Now just rest on your front side, however is the most comfortable for you. Take a time out for a second. And see the way that your breath moves in your back. And then once again, bend up your right knee and put your left cheek down on the floor. So you're looking to the right again. And your arms are above your head with your fingers pointing at each other. And start to gently lift your two wings, lift your two elbows away from the floor, bring them back down. And listen for the elevating, buoyant expansion of your inhalation, the wind current that your wings are floating on. And on your own timing, start to investigate what it feels like to change the position of your head as you are gently flying. As you're gently lifting your elbows away from the floor, bringing them back down, can you rotate your head so that your other cheek is on the floor? And keep track of your breathing. So gently lift your two elbows and bring them back down. Your arms are above your head on the floor. Your fingers are almost touching. And your arms are straightish, right? And then if you can get a nice, comfortable flow of lifting your elbows, then start to explore when you could turn your head so that your other cheek is down on the floor. Notice if you're pushing into your hands in order to turn your head. And if you find that that's your strategy, have your hands farther away from your head. So the arm situation, this is Moshe Feldenkrais for you. The arm situation is this genius trick of creating constraint so that you're required to start learning how to use your upper thoracic spine, which is years after he invented these lessons, it's so much more important. It's ridiculous. Most of us have completely lost track of that part of our spine, the bottom of our neck, the part of our spine between our shoulder blades. So you're really asking something incredible. So don't force it, right? Some of you haven't used this part of you in like a decade. and you can play with your own timing, right? So how many times do you flutter your arms as you're turning your head?
Turn at the same time?
You could do it at the same time. Maybe you lift your arms as you turn. And if that's your strategy, then of course, what I'm going to say is, well, trick yourself, do something different, right? But if it's painful or a strain, don't keep doing it that way. Isn't that weird? Why do we do that? Why do we keep doing something that's hard or straining or painful? All right, just pause for a second in that position if you can. Or yeah, change your position if you're uncomfortable, of course. Just pause on your front side. And then this time try it, same configuration, right knee still bent out to the right, left cheek is still down, arms are still above your head, hands are still above your head. And in this time, okay, so a moment ago you were saying, okay, can I differentiate? Can I do a movement of lifting my elbows as I'm turning my head? That's interesting. Now this time you'll lift your elbows and keep them lifted and start experimenting with how it is to rotate your head. And listen for your breathing, right? How do you support the movement of your head from your breathing? Take a little break on your back. And notice the way that you see yourself. Notice the size of each of your shoulders and the width of your upper back and the width of your collarbones and the way that you feel your legs connect somehow to your torso. And see if what you've done so far is starting to influence the feeling of your breathing. And then come on your right side and bend up your left knee. Have your face looking to the left. On your front side. So your left knee is bent up to the left. Your right cheek is down on the floor. And your hands are up above your head in a long diamond shape. Fingertips are looking at each other. Yep. And you might notice that this is more or less comfortable than the other configuration. Again, think about your spine, right? So right now, back of your neck and the rest of your spine more or less is looking to the left. Yes? And think about where in your back you can feel when you lift your left elbow away from the floor and bring it back down. Your shoulder blades slide on your ribs to help lighten your elbow. And notice how it's different. If you try to fix your shoulder blade, don't, and do this really gently. Don't let your shoulder blade move, and notice what it feels like to try to lift your elbow without letting your shoulder blade move. Or how about have your shoulder blade kind of up toward your ear a little bit. Again, just do the super gentle, right? And feel the feeling of lifting your elbow when your shoulder is up there. Like you're saying, I don't know. Yeah. And then again, go for a gliding. How much can you allow a gliding of your shoulder blade when you lift your elbow? And again, think about the buoyancy of your air. Yeah. Do you need to use your right side to do something with your left side? What if you were just happy to not lift that high? What if you were happy to just barely lift at all? Could that be a more pleasant experience? Okay, now leave your left elbow down and lift and lower your right elbow. What do you notice about your spine from the back of your skull, down between your shoulder blades, down to your low back, down to your sacrum, down to your tailbone when you're lifting and lowering your right elbow? And do this entirely in your imagination this time. Imagine lifting both of your elbows. Imagine what that feels like in your chest, which is in front of your spine, in your belly and your low back, your tailbone. And of course, because it's your imagination, there's a whole world of potential here. So you might be able to imagine that you lifted your elbows all the way to the ceiling. And then you can continue to imagine, or if you'd like to, you can start to explore doing. Lifting both elbows together. And then what if you go back and forth? So you lift one, and then as you're bringing it back down, you start to lift the other one. And go slowly, do less than what you can do, so you can feel the feeling of lifting one and how your shoulder responds. And then as you start bringing that down, you feel the other shoulder starting to move to lift the other one. Rest a bit, however you're comfortable on your front side. And then bend up your left knee and put your left cheek down. You're looking to the right. And your hands are above your head on the floor. Fingertips looking at each other. And start to play here with how it is to lift one elbow. And then as you're lowering that down, start to lift the other elbow. And slow down. And feel how your breathing is affecting the movement. And again, see if you can get a sense of relationship between the movement of your shoulder and some kind of turning of your spine. What an interesting question you're asking your spine in this situation. Now leave your elbows resting and do an extremely gentle movement of switching your head, rotating your head so the other cheek comes down, and pause, land completely. And how about this? Before you switch it back, zero in on your initiation. So before you do, feel the pre-do. And notice what happens in your back. And then you can do the movement, or maybe you don't do the movement at all. You just play with that little micro initiation feeling. Pause for a moment. Maybe angel doesn't work for you. Maybe you're some sort of phenomenal bird. So you might imagine what kind of bird you are. And then you can start to explore a little bit how your wings work. So you can start to lift and lower your wings, lift and lower your elbows as you're turning your head. And notice your timing. And you can play with your timing. Right? So maybe you flap your wings 2 or 3 times as you're turning your head. Maybe you turn your head twice in one flap of the wings. You just play with it a bit on your own. Yes, some of you are flapping one wing, then the other wing. Sure, whatever you want to do. Just make sure that you're paying attention. You're not just doing anything arbitrarily. Just pay attention to what you're doing and stay interested in the feelings. If you start to feel a strain or a pain, it's a good indicator that you are working too hard there, right? If you're getting exhausted, you're pushing too hard. You did the movement, think about it, right? If you did the movement slow enough and small enough, arguably you could do this all day, right? Very nice. Yeah. Okay. Leave it and rest on your back. And as usual, as we explore these last few variations, check in with yourself and say, oh, am I doing this just to do it? Am I trying to be a good student? Am I trying to finish the class, right? And the question is always, oh, am I engaged in what am I doing? Is it interesting to me? Do I like feeling what I'm feeling? Am I curious, right? If you're done, you're done. Yeah. So you choose. You come onto your front side again. You might also choose to do these variations in your imagination, which could be a very incredible and liberating experience in itself. So come onto your front side again, and this time bend up your right knee. Put your left cheek down on the floor again. So you're looking to the right. Your right knee is bent up as high as you need to be comfortable. And keep your, start with your two hands above your head, again, like you have been, with your fingers, tips of your fingers looking at each other. Yeah? Now, keep your left arm where it is, but bring your right arm out to the right. Straight out to the right, yes. And see if this feels familiar. Start to lift your whole straight arm away from the floor and bring it back down. You remember anything about what you discovered last week in this organization? What we did last week started with the hand and the wrist, so you could try that a few times. Spread your palm, lengthen your fingers, bend your wrist, and then lift your arm with your wrist bent. See what that's like. Your fingers come up away from the floor, then your palm comes away from the floor, and then you lift your arm away from the floor. And then make sure that you completely rest in between variations. And what do you notice about your low back and your pelvis when you're lifting your straight arm? Are you fighting that or bracing? Are you bracing with your left side? And if you find that you're bracing with your left shoulder or your left side, what happens if you soften your left side? Let it melt into the floor, even if that seems like a very strange idea. Just investigate what happens. All right, now leave your right arm resting on the floor straight as it is, and feel your left leg. And see what happens if you lift your straight left leg and bring it back down. Which side does your weight go to when you lift your left leg? Do you remember that from last week? Well, what happens when you lift your right arm and your left leg? Yeah, and how are you breathing? Okay. Now switch sides. Switch your arms, head, legs. Your right arm is above your head. Hand is above your head. Your right arm is straightish above your head. And your left arm is directly out to the left, perpendicular to your body. Your right hand is above your head, straightish. Right elbow is straightish. Right elbow is straightish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, start with your leg on this side. See what happens if you lift your straight leg, your right leg, and bring it back down. And instead of being awesome at lifting your leg really high, see if you can figure out what you do with the entire length of your spine. And you could play with it and see, okay, can you shorten your spine when you lift your leg? That's my favorite trick, shortening my spine as I lift my leg. And then what's the opposite of that? How do you lengthen your spine as you lift your leg? I know for me, I had to throw out a lot of the things that I learned in yoga and be present in my experience of myself doing this. Because we could argue that there's lifting your tailbone, there's tucking your tailbone, but what if there was just an elongation of your tailbone? Right. Okay, yeah, go ahead. See, you could do your arm by itself, or you could, right away, you could bring in your arm and your leg if you like, and see what it feels like when you lift your leg if you're also lifting your straight arm. Lifting your right leg and your left arm. Brilliant. And then take a pause. Again, adjust yourself so that you're comfortable. Notice how you are. And then let's go back to where we started. So come onto your front side with your left cheek down and your right knee bent out to the right. And your two hands above your head, your arms straightish, your fingertips looking at each other. And first thing is just go back to lift one elbow, bring it down, lift the other, and just see if that has improved at all for you, if it feels different. And then start to add back in the turning of your head. And keep alternating your elbows as you're turning your head. And notice your timing. And notice your pelvis. See if you can feel a little bit of turning in your pelvis, turning of your tailbone. Now, pause wherever you are right now with your face, however it is, and switch your knees. Yeah, I have a little carpet burn situation. Yeah, see what you can do there. I don't know if you have to put a blanket under your knee, maybe. And then switch your knees again. Mm-hmm. Could you keep your feet on the floor as you switch your knees? Ah. Could you switch your head as you switch your knees? Yeah. And then that gets a little awkward with the elbows, right? So can you bring in your elbows? When do you lift your left elbow? When do you lift your right elbow? When do you switch your head? And you're not getting anywhere, right? You're just trying out your new wings. It turns out is an entire spaceship. And so you want to see, oh, where's the control room here? What can I do? When do I switch my head? When do I switch my knees? When do I switch my elbows? And am I still breathing? Am I trying to speed up to get it over with real quick? Can you imagine yourself as maybe a, 5-month-old, 4-month-old doing something like this? Trying out your spaceship? You just have fun with it. And if it's not fun, then don't do it. Yeah. Yes. And if you're having fun with it and you're doing it, can you do the opposite of what you're doing? Can you trick yourself out of your own habit? Make sure you're not pushing with your hands. That's a different strategy, right? Different strategy. Your hands are confined above your head. That's a constraint because it means using your back in a way you don't usually use it. Of course, you can push with your hands. That's a different conversation. Right? Your hands are there to make your life more difficult. So you figure out how to deal with life in a less comfortable way. Yeah. Very nice. Okay, and then when you're cooked, you're cooked. So leave it and rest on your back. Move your cushions out of the way and see the version of yourself that you're left with as you rest on your back. Legs long, arms by your sides again. See if you can still feel your wings even as you're resting. And what about your breathing? After all this mysterious work with your chest and your back, your shoulders, does that influence your breathing? There's some little extra potential that you can feel there. You've got the back of your nose widening to the back of your throat. This wide tube from the back of your throat to the top of your collarbones, and then down your chest bone, and across from your chest bone, wrapping around underneath your armpits to your back. See you next week.